There are stories the water never tells, only whispers through waves and rust. And in the coldest, darkest corners of Lake Superior, one such story has remained buried, until now. Nearly half a century after the SS Edmund Fitzgerald vanished without a distress call, a high-tech underwater drone descended into the silent abyss. What it found was not just steel twisted by time, but something far more terrifying. It confirmed a truth too disturbing to ignore, and the silence surrounding the wreck finally screamed. What was captured on camera didn't just explain the past, it sent shivers through every maritime expert watching. And once you see the images, you'll understand why NASA-level panic isn't an exaggeration. In 1958, when the SS Edmund Fitzgerald was launched from Michigan, it wasn't just another ship, it was a monument to engineering. At 729 feet long, she was the largest freighter on the Great Lakes, a floating titan designed to carry over 26,000 tons of iron ore across unforgiving waters. But Fitzgerald was more than a machine. She was a symbol. Her burgundy hull, white superstructure, and sleek lines made her instantly recognizable. Sailors respected her. Families admired her from shorelines. Even children knew her name as she passed beneath the Mackinac Bridge, her horn echoing like a legend in motion. For 17 years, she defied the worst weather the lakes could offer. No major mishaps, no fatalities. To many, she was unsinkable, a term history has rarely forgiven. On November 9, 1975, loaded with ore pellets and headed for Detroit, the Fitzgerald set sail alongside another freighter, the Arthur M. Anderson. Both ships anticipated a routine trip, even as weather forecasts began to worsen. But what started as a squall became one of the most violent storms Lake Superior had ever seen. By November 10th, waves towered over 25 feet, winds surged beyond 70 miles per hour, and visibility dropped to near zero. At 3:30 p.m., Captain McSorley radioed the Anderson. "We have a bad list. Lost event. One of the hatch covers is giving us trouble." Still, his voice was calm, eerily calm. Hours later, he uttered the last words anyone would ever hear from the Fitzgerald. "We are holding our own." And then, silence. No mayday, no flare, no warning. Radar showed the freighter vanish completely. All 29 crew members were lost, and the lake swallowed its secret whole. Eventually, the wreck was discovered 530 feet below, split in two, the bow upright, the stern upside down. But even with this grim discovery, the mystery only grew deeper. How did such a massive vessel, in the presence of another ship, disappear without a single call for help? Theories exploded. Rogue waves, structural failure, collisions with uncharted shoals, even government cover-ups. The Coast Guard blamed faulty hatch covers. The families pushed back, calling it a betrayal of their loved ones' reputations. For decades, arguments raged. Limited sonar scans and grainy submersible footage left more questions than answers. Until 2023. When a new generation of technology descended into the depths with one goal, to uncover the truth with undeniable evidence. In 2023, equipped with 4K cameras, sonar imaging, and AI-powered diagnostics, a remotely operated vehicle, or ROV, descended into the icy silence of Lake Superior. What it found was horrifying in its quiet certainty. Missing clamps on the cargo hatches, a gaping hole where a crucial air vent used to be, clamps bent backward or torn off entirely. These weren't minor oversights. They were catastrophic failures in the ship's only line of defense against the lake's fury. Sediment trails inside the hatch edges confirmed it. Water had been pouring into the Fitzgerald long before anyone on board realized. Worse yet, some clamps appeared to have been replaced years before the tragedy, suggesting the ship may have had a known history of structural strain. One structural engineer reviewing the footage said it bluntly. This wasn't a ship breaking apart. This was a ship slowly drowning. While analysts were focused on the hatch damage, the drone's footage revealed something even more unsettling, something no one was prepared to confront. Along the torn edges of the stern's bulkhead, beneath layers of rust and sediment, appeared what looked like tool markings, symmetrical abrasions not consistent with a natural break caused by pressure or impact. Metallurgists reviewing the high-resolution footage noticed a strange uniformity in the fractures, as if the steel had been compromised from within, not by water, but by mechanical stress or intervention. Some suggested it might have been fatigue from years of vibration and load strain. But one voice inside the engineering review team whispered what others didn't dare to say out loud. These look intentional. Had someone modified the Fitzgerald structure before its final voyage? And if so, who and why? What was buried with the wreck was no longer just a tragedy. It was beginning to look like a cover-up sealed in steel. Using simulation data based on the drone's footage, marine forensic experts recreated the possible timeline of the ship's final minutes. What they found was chilling. The water likely entered slowly, silently. The Fitzgerald may have sailed for hours in its death state, its crew unaware they were doomed. Internal sensors, rudimentary at best, would have failed to register the gradual flooding beneath the cargo holds. And by the time the list became noticeable, it was already too late. The downward pull from the water inside created a torsion that tore the ship in two in less than 20 seconds. According to the model, no one had time to reach the radio, much less abandon ship. The Fitzgerald didn't go down fighting. It was erased in near silence. And this realization only added to the growing suspicion. How could the most advanced freighter on the Great Lakes sink with no audible warning, unless someone didn't want there to be one? As the ROV maneuvered into the stern section, it captured something that had never been seen before: a sealed chamber, hidden behind what was believed to be a collapsed engine wall. This area had never appeared in previous schematics of the Fitzgerald. It contained what looked like a reinforced storage panel, still intact. The steel there bore no signs of corrosion, unlike the rest of the wreck. It was as if it had been shielded, intentionally. Some began to speculate that this chamber may have housed sensitive materials, possibly not listed on the ship's manifest. Rumors long buried surfaced again, that the Fitzgerald may have been carrying more than ore pellets, that it might have transported military-grade equipment or even classified experimental cargo during the Cold War era. The discovery of this sealed space, untouched, unexplained, reignited every conspiracy theory that had been silenced over the decades, and this time there were images to support it. The footage was initially classified as restricted for analysis, but it didn't stay secret for long. Within days, screenshots of the sealed chamber began to leak. Independent analysts, maritime historians, and whistleblowers came forward, confirming what many had suspected for years, that the Fitzgerald story had been sanitized, scrubbed clean of inconvenient truths. The drone had not only uncovered physical evidence, it had unearthed institutional silence, and that silence was now being broken. News outlets began demanding the release of the full footage. Families of the crew called for congressional inquiries. Some former Coast Guard officials hinted at the existence of a file, marked confidential, that was never released to the public. The SS Edmund Fitzgerald was no longer just a shipwreck. It was a time capsule of secrets. And now, with the drone's revelation, those secrets were no longer resting in peace. Just when the investigation team thought they had extracted all the visual data the wreck could offer, the drone's onboard acoustic sensors picked up something chilling. As it hovered near the bow section, it recorded a low-frequency vibration, a kind of pulsing resonance that didn't match any known underwater geological or mechanical source. It wasn't sonar interference. It wasn't the current. This was rhythmic, repeating, patterned. Some engineers dismissed it as sonar rebounding off the ship's twisted structure, but audio specialists from NOAA were less convinced. When the sound was filtered and amplified, the pattern bore mathematical precision, pulses that repeated in prime number sequences. It was almost as if the wreck itself was emitting a coded signal. The idea that this ghost ship was still speaking, decades after it sank, sent a ripple of dread through the entire operation. And what no one could explain is why the drone's acoustic sensors only picked it up when facing that sealed compartment. The Fitzgerald wasn't just broken, it was humming with something. As pressure mounted to publicly release the full footage, investigative journalists began digging deeper into the original dive records from the 1980s. But when they requested the first-hand documents from early submersible expeditions, they were met with an unsettling revelation. Key dive logs were missing. Entire segments of the original footage were redacted. Dive coordinates didn't match public records. Even the names of certain personnel present during the first mission were wiped from archives. Some names were retroactively removed from reports. It was as if the earlier missions had found something they were ordered to forget. One anonymous source claimed that several reels of deep dive film were confiscated by federal authorities and never returned. Why would a freight shipwreck, supposedly the result of poor weather and structural strain, require that level of secrecy? The drone didn't just uncover a wreck. It exposed a timeline manipulated to hide something that began long before 1975. As the drone drifted along the port side, its UV filters detected something no one expected: organic structures growing along the hull. Not rust, not barnacles. These were translucent, tendril-like filaments that glowed faintly under ultraviolet light. Marine biologists called in to analyze the footage were baffled. The organisms didn't match any known freshwater species. They were more similar in structure to deep-sea extremophiles, found only in high-pressure trenches of the Pacific. But this was a freshwater lake. There was no geological pathway for such organisms to have evolved here, and certainly not to thrive exclusively on the Fitzgerald's steel surface. Even more disturbing, the growths were densely concentrated around the sealed chamber. It was as if they were drawn to whatever was inside. Some began speculating not only on a biological anomaly, but on a containment breach of something not meant to be exposed. As part of a final analysis sweep, a 3D model of the ship was reconstructed using drone imagery. When the hull number, 529, was processed under layered light analysis, a new discovery emerged. Microscopic indentations beneath the paint, previously mistaken for corrosion, formed an alphanumeric string. The string didn't match any serial designation or maritime classification. When converted into ASCII code, it spelled out a chilling phrase: "Delivered, never recovered." This engraving wasn't visible to the naked eye, nor was it part of the official documentation. Experts couldn't determine who placed it or when. It was buried under layers of industrial paint and only detectable with modern scanning tools. But its presence was undeniable. Someone had marked this ship. Someone had sent a message to be found only if the wreck was ever discovered. And now that it has been found, the question is no longer what happened to the Fitzgerald. It's what it was really carrying, and who was waiting for it to sink. They called it a tragedy, a storm, a mechanical failure, a moment in time swallowed by nature's wrath. But now, nearly 5 decades later, the Edmund Fitzgerald has revealed a truth that feels more like a confession or a warning. This wasn't just the wreckage of a freighter. It was a sealed vault of questions. Questions that were never meant to resurface. Questions encoded in metal, in strange organic growths, in impossible signals buried beneath cold black water. The image of her rusting hull split in silence was never meant to be studied this closely. The hatch clamps, the sealed chamber, the prime number frequencies, the message etched into steel. All of it paints a picture that no longer belongs in the category of accident. What if this ship didn't just sink under nature's fury, but was meant to vanish? What if it carried not just ore, but knowledge, or cargo, or even something alive? The drone didn't just confirm what we all feared. It confirmed that someone else feared it too, long before us. Feared it enough to hide it. Feared it enough to bury it under hundreds of feet of freshwater silence. And now that the silence is broken, now that we've looked directly into the eye of the lake's oldest secret, the only question left is, what else is still waiting down there, to be found?